Hello and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about Tomorrow by Together's minisode2 Thursday's Child, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of what we know so far about the concept and storyline of this upcoming comeback. Now, minisode2 Thursday's Child is the second installment of the minisode entries that separate one chapter trilogy from the next. We got minisode 1 Blue Hour as an interlude between the Dream chapter and the Chaos chapter, and now we're getting minisode 2 Thursday's Child between the Chaos chapter and whatever the next one will be. The title of this minisode was already foreshadowed all the way back at the Melon Music Awards, and so far we know that the album is going to have 3 versions called Hate, End and Mess. Right off the bat, the style of the logo and the names of the concepts already imply that we are in for a pretty intense comeback, and as we see in a second, all clues seem to confirm this as well. Today I'd like to take a look at these clues to try and guess the possible concept, themes and connections with the Star Seekers, so heads up because there's going to be minor spoilers about the story. On a side note, new videos about the webtoon and the Wattpad are coming very soon, but in the meantime let's jump right in and see what's going on. Now the very first clue that we have is obviously the one that was given to us at the Melon Music Awards, which is none other than Thursday's Child Has Far to Go. This is a line from a nursery rhyme called Monday's Child, and the entire song actually refers to the superstitious belief that the day of the week you are born in is actually able to affect your personality and destiny as an adult. Back in the day, this was a rhyme that was first recorded from oral tradition, and because of that it has many different versions that change the children's quality depending on the author. The version that Tomorrow by Together chose for this comeback is actually one of the most well-known, and its predictions tend to be very straightforward with either positive or negative outcomes. What sets Thursday's Child apart from the others, however, is that this prediction can actually be interpreted in 2 different ways. On the one hand, the more traditional view sees this fate as a very positive one, in the sense that Thursday's Child will go far in life and be successful in their journey to achieve their goals. On the other hand, however, this prediction can also be negative, because the child having far to go can also be read as them being destined to face many struggles in their journey through life. Judging from the ending of the performance and the aesthetic of the album, at first glance it seems that this comeback will take into account the more negative meaning of this prediction, but at the same time I also think that this is not as easy as it seems. Hear me out, the way I see it, the most important aspect of Thursday's Child is actually its ambiguity. If we actually follow the rhyme and take each prediction at face value, the destiny of each child is pretty much set, no matter if it's positive or negative. Whether the child will be full of grace or full of woe, whether they will have to work hard, they'll be loving, wise, so on and so forth, each of them has a very clear destiny and a prediction that gives a vivid image of what's to come. All of them, that is, with the exception of Thursday's Child, whose prediction gives them quite a lot of room for interpretation. Now this is very important, I think, because in the Star Seekers the theme of destiny is an essential aspect of the story. As we already know, the characters that the members are playing are the Boys of Destiny, which are a group of chosen ones who are destined to save the world from being swallowed by chaos, darkness and destruction. At the same time, however, the very apocalypse that the boys are meant to avoid is also an event that seems pretty much destined to take place as well. Much like what we saw in Eternal, the Doom's Night, and more recently in the Wattpad, Subin's character Soul has premonitions of a future where he is the only survivor of a terrible catastrophe. This means that much like Thursday's Child, the Star Seekers are facing 2 seemingly opposing paths at the same time. One is a path of success where they eventually save the world, while the other is a path of pain where they meet a violent and untimely death. Whether they succeed or fail, the whole point is that they still have far to go, but another important detail here is that whether they succeed or fail, their destination is still the same. You see, in the story, the true destiny of the boys actually lies in their true name, which in turn is the name that defines the essence of their soul. Like we saw in Frost, the webtoon and the Wattpad, the Star One receive a hint about their true names from a fortune teller on Magic Island. In the Wattpad, however, this fortune teller actually says something interesting, because when the boys ask him if the true name is a prophecy, the oracle replies that it's similar to a prophecy but not quite like it. According to the fortune teller, it doesn't matter what path you take as long as you get to your final destiny. The true names show your final destiny because they show who you truly are, but how to get there is a different story, because you can actually take many roads to get to the same place. This means that if on the one hand the true names focus on your destination, Thursday's Child focuses on the path to get get there instead. In the story, the boys' destiny is to become the Star Seekers, but whether they succeed in saving the world or die trying seems to be up to them and their choices. Now this is very important, I think, because if you think about it, the theme of choice is always front and center not only in the story, but also in the songs and in the concepts. In the Star Seekers, for instance, the boys choose to make a pact with the odd-eyed cat, and this pact involves a price that they have to pay. In the Wattpad, moreover, Yeonjun's character Eugene also says that he feels like he did something wrong, and this something is a mistake that cannot be undone. This idea terrifies him, and judging by what we saw in Eternally is right about that, because if he made a choice and he chose wrong, then the path of the Thursday's Child might indeed be a very difficult one. This would explain why in the Melon performance Yeonjun wore a mask and shot himself. It's possible that this action is not so much about him ending his own life, but rather about him choosing a path that will lead him to self-destruction. Now the reason why I say this is because the magical universe of the Star Seekers follows the principle of causality, where every action corresponds to an effect. Very simply put, every magic comes with a consequence, so the bigger the magic, the bigger the price. The same thing, however, applies to life as well, because every choice that you make affects your path going forward. In the past, for instance, they had to choose between being angels or devils, between being a pet or a puma, between following the rules or creating new ones, between slaying the dragon or keeping the monster alive, between fighting or escaping, between being losers or being lovers, or to remembering their summer or freeze after losing it. No matter the era we are talking about, the entire discography is full of choices like a balance game, which, bear in mind, is also the Korean title of one of their songs. Each of these choices lead them to a new stage of their journey, but this doesn't necessarily mean that they're choosing right, because as a matter of fact, it seems like the opposite is true. Since the concepts of Minisode 2 are called hate, end, and mess, it seems that the result of their choices led them to a path that will cause their own destruction. To be honest, this is also consistent with what we saw up until now, because whether we're talking about the Star Seekers or the coming-of-age concept of the albums, there seems to be a tendency for always choosing the worst possible path. Even if right now we just have the concept titles, and hate and mess seem to confirm the idea that this time around it's going to be no different, but what's interesting about this is that it seems that each of these titles might refer to a specific aspect of the story and concept. The word end, for instance, heavily recalls the Doom's Night, which back in Eternally was described as the beginning of the end, and that is largely considered the focal point of the apocalypse they have to avoid. If in the story the end refers to the apocalypse, however, in the coming-of-age concept, the end might correspond to a more personal event instead. Back in Can't You See Me, for instance, the Korean title of the song referred to an end of the world, but in the concept they were talking about the ending of their friendship, which in turn caused the destruction of the world as they knew it. This more introspective route would also fit with other clues, because if you look closely, back then the choreography ended with them removing their mask, while in Thursday's Child, Yeonjun wore his mask before meeting his end. This parallel could actually imply that Minisode 2 will focus on what actually led them to the end of their world in their journey to becoming an adult. Back in Can't You See Me, the song described a situation where the dreams of the past were forgotten and the boys were overcome by resentment as their bond crumbled like a sandcastle. The concept called hate might be a follow-up to that idea, because the love that they felt towards each other might now be twisted into something negative instead. This would also fit with the Chaos chapter, which in turn describes the darker aspects of growing up when chaos clouds your judgment and freezes your heart. If Can't You See Me featured a metaphorical end of the world, the concept of 0x1 Love Song was inspired by the end of the fucking world, which in turn is a show about two people running away to escape their own problems and traumas. If in Can't You See Me the boys experience their downfall when they get separated, moreover, in 0x1 Love Song, Yeonjun falls into the black hole instead of himself as he pretends to live in a fantasy where he is back together with the others. If Thursday's Child will be somehow connected to the metaphorical end of the world that caused them to get separated, then this would also explain why the main logo has a broken heart right in the center. The same beating heart that their you was able to temporarily melt and freeze is now broken into pieces as a result of their struggles in their path. This leads us to the mess title, because mess seems to be the consequence of chaos taking over. Back in No Rules, for instance, the boys ran away into a world where they could do whatever they wanted, and where, back in the Dream chapter, they created new rules to rebel against society. Them choosing to be punks in that song, however, has a very negative effect in the long run, because in no rules they realize that they made a mess, which now they are unable to escape. As I mentioned earlier, like in the Star Seekers, magic comes with a price. In life, the choices you make have consequences as well. Back in the Chaos chapter, the album ended with them losing themselves in the frozen landscape of their broken dreams, so back then the concept offered no resolution to this tragic ending. Much like what they showed us at the awards, after their you came through to save them and turned them into lovers, soon enough life made them losers once again, and they fell back into the frozen abyss of their own chaos. Chances are the minisode 2 will follow up on these themes and in turn introduce new ones to foreshadow the events of the new chapter series. Story-wise, the focus might be on the Doom's Night, the storm on Magic Island, as well as on the apocalypse that they consistently fail to avoid. Concept-wise instead, they might dive deeper into the metaphorical end of the world, that is, an event that alters the path of their life once and for all. With a little bit of luck, we might even see the comeback of the dragon, which in the Wattpad is called the Dragon of the End, but also the return of the broken-hearted teddy bear, which is indeed not a teddy bear at all, but for now we'll have to wait for Spoiler Week to spoil us with new content. If you look around, there's a lot of books, songs and movies connected to Thursday's Child, some of which might also be connected to the comeback. A good example of this is actually Thursday's Child by Kiyoshi Shigematsu, which is a book where one of the chapters is called The Beginning of the End, and where the main event of the story is described as the end of the world despite not involving a literal apocalypse. Another possible reference, however, might also be Thursday's Child by David Bowie, which in turn is an artist already referenced in the Chaos chapter. In the story, Bowie tells the story of a man who is a Thursday's child living a difficult life, but in his struggle is happy to live because his path led him to his loved one as well. Depending on which concept they'll follow, they could both be a fitting reference considering the Chaos chapter, but whether they use them or not, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!